Let's bring in Norman Ornstein. He is a resident scholar at American Enterprise Institute, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. today. Norman, it's good to talk to you. It seems like at least the president-elect feels like things are going as smoothly as to be expected, given the delay in this GSA giving this go-ahead, the green light for, in fact, this transition process to move forward. What are your concerns right now as you look to this really full plate of policies the Biden administration will have to tackle very urgently, with the coronavirus being at the very top of the list?
I define this as the transition from hell soon after the election. And despite President-elect Biden's optimistic words, there are a lot of things happening that are not quite so good. There are many things that a president can do during this time, which is unique for established democracies. 2.5 months when a president is still in office with all of his powers and his team as well. And when you have a deep resentment, a refusal to concede, just to pick one example, just yesterday, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin did something which I would view as outrageous and unconscionable, which is to take a step to wall off over $400 billion in aid from the CARES Act that would go out for COVID relief, so that Janet Yellen, the incoming Treasury Secretary, couldn't access it without congressional approval, which may not happen, or which may be constrained by Mitch McConnell. There are actions that can be taken by the executive. We know that the president did an executive action to open up the Tongass forest to all kinds of development, and now is giving out leases on the wildlife refuge that probably won't be able to be rescinded. We're going to see, I think, a scorched earth approach by a president who resents the fact that he lost and that somebody else is coming in. And then we've got to worry about destruction of records and, of course, a whole series of pardons that are likely to take place, starting with Michael Flynn, but we'll move on to many, many others. So this is not going to be a typical transition, as nothing in the Trump presidency has been typical.
I mean, all of this, of course, comes as there are millions of Americans who are still out of work, looking at potential evictions at the end of the year with the expiration of the CARES Act as well. How do you think this messy process, as you've put it, hinders the economic recovery at a time when there are so many Americans that are waiting for that additional stimulus package to be passed?
You know, I've been very concerned at the lack of action in Congress and the president's desire before the election to do a bigger package even than Nancy Pelosi had recommended and the House had passed, that went for naught. Right now, the Senate seems to be doing nothing except trying to confirm more judges. And if we don't get that package before the new administration takes over, that's all the way to January 20th. We're going to have, I think, as we're already seeing the upsurge in COVID, we're going to see more establishments closed. It's going to be very hard to move an economic recovery along unless we take some steps to enable people to get back to work. One would hope that we would get some relief very soon, and that there would be a more ambitious package once we have a new administration in place. So a lot of that will depend on what happens in those 2 Georgia Senate elections on January 5th and who has the majority in the Senate. But, you know, there are a lot of things happening, including the failure inside the administration to grab a hold of the burgeoning coronavirus expansion that are going to complicate matters for President Biden when he takes over on January 20th.
Norm, Dan Roberts here. Let's talk foreign policy for a moment, specifically with China. I'm interested in what you expect Biden's sort of attitude and position to be toward China, especially with regards to tech. I mean, a great example recently, there was all the hue and cry over the Trump administration banning TikTok. And now, sure enough, a few weeks before the end of the administration, TikTok recently came out and said, we're looking for some guidance here because there was no ban and we haven't done the sale yet. And sure enough, it was clearly just a political machination. So I guess I'd ask what you expect Biden to do, because the China tech issues are not just going to go away, even though people generally expect him to be a little friendlier toward China than a President Trump was.
I think he'll be friendlier in some respects, but not in others. I expect him to remove the tariffs. I think he will take a harder line on human rights, certainly with regard to Hong Kong. But my guess is that he is not going to be laissez-faire when it comes to China and tech, since we know there's been a lot of piracy, that there's real concern about the infiltration of the Chinese through our information systems. And I'm expecting that the people he will bring in at the FCC and cybersecurity and elsewhere are going to be plenty vigilant with China. I'm expecting more generally that the approach that Biden will take with China is going to be to try to move stronger relations with South Korea, Japan, Australia, to try and rebuild alliances that will keep China from having greater hegemony in that part of the world, while also trying to reach out more diplomatically than Trump has done, at least in the last few months. It's going to be a complicated relationship, though. And it's not as if Democrats in Congress are thrilled with China. They've been very tough on China, starting with Nancy Pelosi for decades. And the trade issue is not going away, even if the tariffs do.
Yeah, we've heard Joe Biden repeatedly say that he's looking to build a multi-lateral coalition, essentially, to try and pressure China instead of the U.S. going it alone. We'll continue to watch that to see how it plays out. Norm Ornstein joining us from American Enterprise Institute. He's a resident scholar there. Good to talk to you today.
Good to talk to you, too. Thanks.